All right. Well, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com. And we are now into July now. I covered the first month of July last week, but we've got more to cover this week. Of course, there's the biggest film we're covering coming out this weekend of Superman. That's going to be released on Friday, so we're having an early review of it today. Just as the review embargo drops, James Gunn's latest take on Superman. We'll also be talking about On a Guinea Fowl, a little film that I've been meaning to get to, and I'm finally caught up with it, and I'm excited to talk about it now. It's a film about death and trauma, and it's just a wonderful little film that we're going to talk about. And also another weird little film, because I thought, since I'm talking about Superman, how about a little bit more DC? So I thought I'd also review Batman Ninja versus Yakuza League. And it's very strange, and probably one of the strangest films we'll talk about on stream. But let's we'll get right into it. So if you want to read some of the reviews of what I'm talking about here today, you can check out movieswithmark.com. Like, if you can't wait, if you just need to know about Superman right now, you can go to movieswithmark.com and read my review. It's up there already. But if you'd like to see more early reviews like this, be sure to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date on the latest movies. And be sure to check out my Patreon, where I am writing books on movie history. Okay, now that we got all that out of the way, get straight into our review of the latest Superman film. And just to clarify, for anyone who's worried, this is a spoiler-free review. I will not be doing spoilers. I'm going to do my best not to reveal anything all that big that hasn't been obvious in the trailers. So if you're worried that I'm going to spoil anything, don't worry, I will not. I won't reveal any of the big cameos or anything like that. Or any major plot points. So I've covered the Avengers films and stuff like that when they were huge. This isn't my first rodeo, so don't worry. Okay, let's get my notes up here. So I have the roster and some of the notes about what I want to talk about. Oh, hang on. I gotta switch a window here. There we go. Okay. Oh, no, it expanded. Why did it do that? Hang on. There we go. Okay. All right, here we go with the review of Superman in 3, 2, 1. So James Gunn's Superman it's everything that I love about Superman. I had a good feeling about this film, with James Gunn going into it, because he usually approaches, his material with a lot of heart. And, his previous DC Comics projects of the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker and Creature Commandos, those have all been ensemble projects, which were kind of about misfits, and they had they're very much like anti-heroes, but Gunn knew how to make you care about them. He made sure that those films still had heart, so that you cared about these ridiculous misfit tossed aside characters. So when he's given the chance to work on something like Superman, he makes sure that heart is beating loud and fervent and just bright. It pretty much is what I would expect James Gunn to do with this material. He has a lot of love for Superman, and he takes a lot of great stuff from the comics, and also puts a lot of his own hallmarks into it, so that he can make kind of the Superman I love, but also one that's more distinct. And especially because he chose such a great actor to fit the part, that's more for not for marquee value, but for just okay, this guy, he's got to be Superman. He's got to work for the type of character I want to make. So he brings in David Cornsweet, and he has that perfect vibe for what Gunn's going for here, which is basically he wants to make Superman, by extension both Superman and Clark, this kind of dork who fumbles around, and he loves dogs. It just makes him just that, very much a lovable dork. And I think that's a great route to go. Especially we've got the gloom and doom Superman. We've gotten the a whole putting on the act that would happen with Christopher Reeve with Richard Donner's version. And Gunn just kind of makes the character fully realized. He does the same, James Gunn's script, he does the same thing that he does with the Suicide Squad and Creature Commandos, is that he plops you right in to the universe. He assumes that the audience is going to be able to catch up and doesn't need a slow introduction to get you used to the character, which, for Superman, you don't. Like, we all know his origin by this point. The last son of Krypton, dumped on Earth, raised by Ma and Pa Kent, goes to Metropolis. He falls in love with Lois Lane, fights Lex Luthor, gains superpowers, becomes Superman. We all know that. And if you don't know that, the film still kind of like parses out like little areas here and there where it can reveal a little bit more about like Superman's past and how it ties in here. But we plop right down in. Like, it's been like several years. Like, people are now used to superheroes. It feels like a more fully realized version. Like we're hitting the ground running. Like, literally from like the first scene, we just see Superman smash into the ground like mid battle. It's just like we're immediately caught up. We're like, okay, what's currently happening with Superman? And we're introduced to it. We're kind of like eased in to what we expect. We were introduced to Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult, who is very much egotistical and greedy and focused on, defeating Superman. And he has had enough time to, study Superman and his moves that he's made these very calculative efforts to assemble these other villains alongside him, like the engineer, to take care of Superman, or at least, punch him back long enough so that Lex can execute his very like complex and intricate plan. So he's fascinating on that angle. But I think what immediately won me over in like the first act of the film is just like the way how they established the relationship between Clark Kent and Lois Lane, here played by Rachel Brosnahan. I think I've said Rachel Brosnahan. And I love how their dynamic, like they established that, yes, like, yeah, like Lois does know Clark's secret identity, and they're kind of at that stage in their relationship where they're no longer kind of like talking about Superman as like an outside person, but now just into that area where they're kind of like establishing more trust. And not only like trust, but also like journalistic integrity, with how the two of them, like what seems like it'll start as a date turns into more of a like a debate about Superman's vigilantism and how much control he has over his own identity. And it's not approached in like a very like, kind of like lofty talk about like gods and, having too much power and stuff like that. It's approached in a way that you would expect a couple to feud. Not to mention, like, even when they're fighting in that moment, like, there's still like an adorable couple, because you watch like Superman kind of try to like fumble with his words. Like, there's clearly moments where he's in the wrong, where he's talking about some of his views of the world and his politics, and Lois kind of like struggles to like keep up with him and say like, yeah, that's not quite how this works, and did you really do this? And it's like they have like great chemistry in that moment where it's just like, okay, I'm locked. I'm interested to see where this goes, because one of the bigger aspects that comes up is not just, the fact that Superman is an immigrant and how that plays into how he's viewed by people like Lex and people around him, but also his view on geopolitical conflicts is brought into the equation. And it's not treated in like a stumbling way that like Batman v Superman was, where it was just like, like a political strife in like a particular country was just used to, enact Luthor's plans to have Superman and Batman fight each other. It's nothing that dumb. Like, Luthor does actually have an end goal here that kind of makes sense. It's not the most original plan, but it is one you can understand, and it is one that is where the complexity actually leads to something, instead of just like, where you're, you don't care about the destination. It's all about the journey itself. Here, it's a pretty good destination with the journey. But having like Superman take an interest in politics and how he shapes himself, I think makes him far more interesting, because they establish him not just as someone who can, punch out bad guys and fight giant monsters. We know that he can do that. But the film will present us with a scene where he doesn't just have to fight a giant monster, but he has to prevent any loss of life and keep damage to a very low minimum. And just watching him, try to think that quickly and try to, basically realize that it's not enough that I have superpowers. Like, I got to do better, I think makes him such a much more endearing character about, trying to think of like what's the best way to use his powers, because like we all know he could obliterate a city, obliterate a giant monster, but using them in a way to avoid just, chaos and carnage and damage, that's what makes him more fascinating, especially because he actually does have some competition in this film. Like I said, they established that there are other superheroes in this universe, and we establish, on this planet, they establish Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern, played by Nathan Fillion, Hawkgirl, played by Isabella Merced, and the smartest man alive, Mr. Terrific, played by Eddie Gathegi. And man, he dominates his role for just, having this dry wit about him. Like, they establish him as someone who is really smart, but also just, fairly unemotional and unable to interact with other people. Like, he's not entirely unemotional, but he just gets fed up with people. So it presents this challenge of Superman trying to prove that he can not so much be better than these people, but set a better example for these other superheroes. So that, so eventually, that he can become the leader of what is essentially being established here as the Justice League. Although the more I looked at it, the more I looked at like the roster that's assembled and how this team comes together, I kind of looked at the screen of like, is this Justice League International? Because it really does look like, it's not completely Justice League International, and I can't help but feel like that might be part of the reason why they shy away from using the ensemble name of Justice League in case they want to change it at some point. But yeah, having Superman learn to work with these other superheroes and additionally consider how he is viewed by the public instead of just brooding about his situation, but also just having this bright outlook about wanting to inject kindness into a world where it's in like fairly short supply, and that he's got to basically not just fight to save a country from being brutalized and fight to save Metropolis from being destroyed by Lex Luthor. He's basically just got to fight with the identity that he's established, and to make sense for people who might be scared of his presence. Not to mention, I haven't mentioned Crypto. Crypto is probably, I love how they, there are a few ways that you could go with Crypto. I mean, we've seen him established in the film, what was it, like that Super Pets film, where he's kind of like a, fairly loyal dog who, is, nice to Superman. They kind of go the opposite route here by making Crypto more of an untrained and unruly dog. So he ends up, and I'm sure people have probably seen this in the trailers and clips, but yeah, Crypto is not all that bright. So even though Superman kind of, relies on Crypto for some additional support and help, he can't always do that because he's still a dog. And he does fairly ridiculous and dumb dog things, which kind of actually made him more endearing as well. He actually cared a little bit more about Crypto and whether or not Superman can save him in this whole adventure. Also, I'm sure this isn't a surprise, but much like James Gunn's other films, he really does love animals. So of course Crypto gets a lot of focus here, but also a lot of smaller animals come into the equation as well that are also safe. At one point, Superman there's a scene where Superman is just saving people from all the chaos, and at one point he just saves a squirrel, just one little squirrel out of nowhere, and just saves it. It's okay, that makes sense. It's James Gunn style here. But the other thing I appreciate with how James Gunn makes this film work is that there are a lot of Easter eggs. Like if you have been watching shows like Peacemaker and Creature Commandos, there are some cameos in it, but they're more like Easter eggs. If you're worried about that, you do not have to watch those shows to appreciate this film. They're just kind of little Easter eggs there that are off to the side. If you know the reference, you'll find it funny. If you don't worry about it. You don't need to. Just fun little stuff like that, because most of the film kind of functions that way by highlighting a lot of cool stuff from the comics, and of course bringing in these characters we haven't seen before on the big screen, like Mr. Terrific and Hawkgirl, and they're pretty fun. But I think I do need to address probably the biggest flaw of the film, which is that I get the feeling that Gunn really wants to make a big impression with Superman. And he wants to bring out all the best attributes of the character here. And to a degree, he does, but there's so much that comes out in this film, and there's so many balls juggled with so many characters and different plot lines and themes to explore with Superman that some of it does end up getting minimized to a certain degree. Like they're minimized, but they're not like, it doesn't feel like they were like wasted potential. It just feels like, like, oh, this is cool. Can we explore it? Okay, we explored it a little bit, but not as much as I'd like to. That being said, even like the smaller characters who you think would have like not much to do, they still have their moments of charm here. In particular, I really dug how they weaved like Jimmy Olsen and Eve Tessmacher, who, if you remember the original Superman film, he was Lex Luthor's girlfriend. She is here. Both of them, they could have just felt like one-note joke characters that this film could have just like thrown away. But they actually have a lot of charm to the few scenes that they have here. The same goes for Ma and Pa Kent here, which they really stress like that kind of Kansas accent in their voice here. They do become like kind of the emotional pillar for like Superman to keep on fighting and for, inspiring him to do what he does. And I would say like I'd like to see a little bit more of them in this film, especially since it almost kind of feels like they're bookends for what feels like is a bigger theme of like nature versus nurture, which is one of the many themes that Gunn has in this film. That it kind of reduces the effects of Clark's parents down to this one like little monologue about choice from Pa Kent. And I would say that's a little, like too simplified. Like, okay, we can kind of see this coming, but the way that it's delivered, I think, with everything else that the film has kind of like worked for, with its with establishing Clark as a more emotional and vulnerable superhero, it makes sense. It's actually a surprisingly rather tearful monologue with the way that Pa Kent delivers it here. That doesn't just feel like, this kind of like stern, proud moment, but like, the sensation of just like, revealing yourself as, being concerned and, almost scared of wanting to put yourself out there, but making sure that you do it anyway. And I think that the same goes for like how James Gunn made this Superman film. I think that this film, like, it's not afraid to go certain places. It's not afraid to be bold with establishing Superman. It's not afraid to be political. And it's definitely not afraid to make, some of the obvious jokes that you would make about some of these superheroes, like, with like, I mean, because I do love Superman, and I love that, Gunn still has an earnestness and a heart to the character. It makes him kind and wonderful, but can still, address the fact that this guy is wearing red underwear on the outside. And not to mention, Guy Gardner has a ridiculous haircut. You have to admit that. So Gunn doesn't shy away from that as well. He basically does the stuff that I love with Justice League Unlimited, which is, plop you into this universe with, stay true to the comics, but also be a little bit more open about the ridiculousness of these types of characters, which does not demean the film. I think for a lot of people, they'll think, oh, it's just going to be too jokey. They're not going to take anything seriously here. It's like, no, they do, but you do need jokes, and you need some levity so that you can care about these characters instead of just being like an onslaught of the dark and the serious. Because if it's all dark all the time, it becomes really hard to care about these characters who are so serious with all this. And that was like a big problem with Zack Snyder's films of like Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. It's like they took themselves so seriously that they never took a moment to like step back and recognize the ridiculousness of the situation to basically make it seem more human. Because I mean like the way that like Snyder's films kind of felt like it felt like it was more about like a battle of man versus God. And with Gunn's film, I think, I don't think it's so easy to like nail down. Like I said, there's nature versus nurture, which does play a big role in the film. But then there's also brain versus brawn, which plays a role in the big climactic fight here. But I do like the fact how, because it feels like some people try to argue for like the Snyderverse films. It's like, oh well, with all the other Superman films, it was Superman versus Lex Luthor, so it was brain versus brawn, brain versus brawn. Why can't we have brawn versus brawn? And I love the fact that this film, within its script, it does find a way to counter that by saying like, it's not just about brain versus brawn. There's way more to it than that. So yeah, there's a lot of the themes explored here, and like I said, some of it does get minimized, but for the most part, I think the stuff that matters, James Gunn focuses on the most and makes you care about it. Even just like nothing stuff, like at Superman's Fortress of Solitude, he's got all these robots, and like the lead robot, voiced by Alan Tudyk, is called Number 4. Even he has his moments of charm, and I just thought there's going to be nothing to that scene. It's just going to be Superman has to go to this fortress. He has to repair himself and get back into the battle. It's like, no, you can use these moments to have more fun dialogue and like define these characters more instead of just dulling out exposition in order to get to the next scene. And James Gunn has done that fairly well in stuff with like Guardians of the Galaxy, and he does it well here as well. He makes a very bright, colorful, endearing, and most importantly, an honest Superman film. It really felt like, because I think one of the inspirations for James Gunn wanting to make this film was just, the connection that he had with his dad, and wanting to bring some of that out in this material. And I really think he does make that clear here. It feels like a much more personal story to that degree, while still also just having fun with Superman and all the other, little DC Comics hallmarks here. So it packs a lot into this film, and it you really do have to keep up with it. It's pretty like quick with how it darts between Superman being drawn into a geopolitical conflict, and Lex Luthor's evil schemes that get revealed, and all the other superpowered superheroes that get revealed in this. There's a lot that's packed into it, but the fact that it's able to keep up with like a lot of its themes and tones, and just be fun. I think that is the key factor. I think, like I said, there's a lot of weighty themes here, but for the most part, it's just a fun superhero film, and it brings out the best stuff that I love about Superman. Like, there's a lot of Superman comics that I read, and my favorite ones are the ones where you see Superman showing some of that kindness, but also showing him, becoming more engaged with our world, instead of just being, like the typical superhero who just like saves a cat and then punches out the giant monster and that's it. No, here they show that Superman has a mind and thoughts and beliefs, and that they're not all perfect, and that they have to that he has to work on this stuff and has to be better in a world that is constantly trying to define him. And that's what makes him such a more interesting character, I think, than how everyone else simplifies him to being just this superpowered dude in red underwear who can punch people really hard. I mean, that kind of seems what we got in the Snyderverse films, but it's not what we got in the James Gunn films. So yeah, for being that just that bright and colorful and just overflowing with warmth. I mean, this is the Superman I love. This is the Superman from comics like All-Star Superman and Superman Smashes the Klan that I love so much. And I could not be more happy with the fact that James Gunn has tried to bring out that side of the character in just a big, exciting and fun, colorful film like this. So yeah, I absolutely adore James Gunn's Superman film. So, Superman, the latest Superman film, is currently is going to be in theaters this Friday. Although technically it will be in theaters on Thursday evening, Thursday previews and all that. So yeah, hopefully I don't think I spoiled anything big there. Not at all. I haven't even talked about or the fact that they go to, or the cameos by. So I think we're good. Okay. I realize we got a few comments in the chat here. I'll look at them here. But don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything if anyone has anything to ask. All right. So let's see. Thanks for not spoiling it. No problem. Scorn says, glad to hear most reviews of Superman are positive. Yeah, it was a good time. I think not to spoil anything, but I think like Mr. Terrific is going to be a standout for some people. I think just his dynamic and his performance is so good. So, let's see. Scorn says, I watched Heads of State last night. I thought it was really fun. I love those shut your brain off action films. Well, I mean, it's yeah. Well, I think yeah. Like, I want to clarify. Like, by shut your brain off, a film has to be really good to make you shut your brain off. And by good, I mean, you have to like be excited by the action. You have to care about the characters. That you're willing to overlook the dumb scripting, which Head of State mostly does. Mostly does. Yeah, it's definitely worth it if you like Elba and Cena. From their dynamic on Suicide Squad, yeah, Heads of State's not bad. It's more of their same banter. I don't think it's the best like writing for them, but it's definitely like a good use of their talents. So let's see. Brennan 100 says it's interesting and revealing who walks away loving it and who walks away hating it. for Oh, for Superman. Well, I mean the embargo only dropped like when did it drop? Like 5 hours ago. So I've read some negative, and I could see why some people might say it's negative because, like I said, like it does minimize a lot of what it's trying to like throw at you, and only like the big stuff is kind of like it gets the most thematic focus. But much like Guardians of the Galaxy, which is also juggling act, it's the same deal here. So. If you dug Guardians of the Galaxy, then yeah, you'll definitely dig Superman. But I doubt I have to tell any of you that. You've seen them. All right, let's see. Scorn. What I love about this and Fantastic Four was one of the directors said something like, we don't need to battle it out on which movie is the better. We can just enjoy both and be happy. Yeah, I mean, like, and the thing is, like, that's more of like a corporate decision, I would think, more than anything. Because, for one, like, James Gunn's not worried. Like, James Gunn's currently in charge of the entire DCU. He's writing the next few movies and TV shows. I don't think he's sweating about, whether or not this one does that well. He's already working on everything else. So I can understand why some directors might freak out about the release dates and how the theatrical releases are handled. Because that ultimately determines what they'll work on next. But since James Gunn's in charge, it's fine. I think the director of Fantastic Four might be a little worried, just because, I don't know, they can swap out like directors pretty quickly. But if they're just making the film that they want to make, and I mean, it's another great colorful superhero film for this month, I think it's a good addition. But the interesting thing, too, though, is that not only are we getting Superman and Fantastic Four in the same month, but I think like exactly last year was when Superman finished filming and Fantastic Four started filming. So what I'm most curious about with these productions is to see how well the visual effects hold up in Fantastic Four for the more limited amount of time they had. Now, the visual effects in Superman are pretty damn good. They're pretty grand. Like there's like some big citywide destruction and stuff like that. But for the most part, of just making you accept these characters like Mr. Terrific with all his spherical drones and Guy Gardner with his Green Lantern powers, they're integrated effortlessly. They're fairly effortlessly. We're just like, okay, yeah, I believe that this superhero world where Mr. Terrific can just fly around and do this, and Guy Gardner can make giant middle fingers that come out of the ground and stuff like that. I can get it, yeah. So I'm very curious to see how the visual effects hold up for Fantastic Four, especially since it sounds like they're gonna have Galactus in this. So, and that's gonna be a major make or break moment, whether or not Galactus looks pretty good for the screen. So hopefully it's good. Mark, did you ever see I Saw the TV Glow? I did. I was initially kind of hesitant. Like, I thought the film was okay. Like, I thought the details placed in that film for trying to replicate that 1990 sensation, I thought was great. I think, without question, like, the best thing you can say about that film is how it replicated the 90s. As someone who grew up in suburbia during that time, those are a lot of, like, the same sensations I had replicated right up on screen. That is, for anyone who didn't grow up in the 90s, that is probably the most accurate reflection of 90s suburban life that I can think of. The biggest problem I had with that film, though, is that the transgender allegory is so vocal within like the first few minutes that it becomes obvious. You're just like, okay, so this character basically is, you know, trans, and they have to realize that they are trans and get to that moment. But the problem is, like, the film spends so much of its time spinning its wheels about restating the obvious over and over. And I wouldn't mind that so much if there was more dread and anxiety with, like, you know, realizing that you're missing out on something, that you're not being true to yourself. But there are several moments where like, the director Schumacher, like, clearly has a lot of inspiration from David Lynch in how she stages a lot of scenes, which I think is fine. But there's a scene in a bar where, you know, they're discussing the TV show and what it implies for their lives. And basically, you know, getting around to the obvious statement that, you know, it was trying to say that, you know, this person was trans. But there are several moments where, like, they just have all these pauses that linger. And to his credit, yeah, like, Lynch also had pauses, and not to mention the cutaways to, like, the concert scenes. But the thing is, Lynch's pauses were always, like, they were pregnant pauses. There was always, like, something more under the surface and something more intriguing to explore. Whereas with I Saw the TV Glow, it's all leading to one thing. It's like we know what it is. It's all going to that same spot, and it's just restating the obvious over and over again without as much anxiety. I think there should have been more of that to, like, better communicate, because, like, the last few minutes of the film I think are great. I just think that there should have been, like, more of, like, that dread that came with it, instead of, like, these lingering pauses that don't develop all that much. So that was my big frustration. I'm sure if I watched the film again, I'd probably love it a whole lot more, just for all the details and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not a bad film. It's not a bad film. It's not. I didn't find it as great as everyone did, because, like I said, like, it kind of spins its wheels here and there. But, and not to mention, like, there are other much better transgender films from that past year that I loved a whole lot more. Like the People's Joker with such an anarchistic take to DC Comics and stuff like that. I love that film. T-Blockers is a great little scruffy horror film about zombies and the trans experience, which these are projects made by actual, like, trans creators too. So and I say that only because I want there to be more variety. Like, because, like, some will say, like, well, I mean, like, I Saw the TV Glow was a much more mainstream film than, like, The People's Joker and T-Blockers. Those are much smaller films, but they are from trans creators, and they're from very vocal, very fearless trans creators that I felt did, like, a lot more with their films. So I want to hold those films up a lot more. Hopefully more people check them out instead of just, you know, bitching about shit like Amelia Perez. Like, so sick of hearing about that film. Let's see. BKS says, love your stuff, bro. Glad Superman was good. Yeah. Storm Rising says, loved your video on Chris Gore. When I found out he became some anti-woke grifter, I was like, said, how? Why? That's pretty much my same deal too. Like, I remember hearing about his Kickstarter. It's like, oh, okay, starting a film thread. You know, good for him. I remember watching DVD Tuesday and hearing about film thread. Yeah, good for Chris. And then Chris went off the deep end and didn't come back. Unfortunately. Very unfortunate. Storm Isaac says, we're due for a good Fantastic Four movie. Well, long overdue. Also, hopefully the X-Men will be good as well. The Fox movies, for the most part, aren't great. They got progressively worse, I think, as they started losing as they started, like, losing, like, better talent. Like, you can see that kind of happen. Like, the first X-Men film I thought was okay, then X2 was great, and then I thought, oh, what are they gonna do for X3? And then the director went off to work on Superman. So then we got Brett Ratner, which wasn't a very good film for X3. The same thing happened for the prequel films of, like First Class was good, and I love Days of Future Past, and then we got Apocalypse, which was a mess, and then Dark Phoenix, which was an even bigger mess. So yeah. I think it's just you got to keep a good talent there, but also, God, like, can we just talk about how great X-Men '97 is? Oh my god, I cannot wait for the second season to come out next year. The first season, I loved the risks they were willing to take with that first season. Like, it punches you hard. Like, not being bound by Saturday morning restrictions anymore, they could do what they wanted, and they made it work. They made that story continue in a great way. So, looking forward to more of that. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see. BKS says, "How do you see a Batman fitting into the new DCU, and how this Superman would interact with a Batman?" I think it could go pretty well. I think the real test for how well Superman will do with Batman, you can see in Mr. Terrific. You can see it, like, because like Mr. Terrific is he's very dry, he's very calculative. And he puts he puts a little bit more of himself ahead of other humans, and doesn't really like interacting with other people. So that's a really good test to see how he can interact with the Batman. Now, that depends if that's the type of Batman that they're going with. But I can see it making it work, because I think one of the films on the DCU docket right now is Batman, well, not Batman, but Brave and the Bold, which you could fit Batman in there. Like, Brave and the Bold is just, team up stuff, but usually it was Batman. So, yeah, I think Superman could interact well with Batman. If it's anything like his interaction with Mr. Terrific in this film, I think it would work really well. I think they'd have a really good dynamic, and not just like the brooding kind they had in Batman v Superman and Justice League movies. So yeah. It could work. I'm curious to see where it goes. Storm Rising says, "I think they said Batman will be separate from Gunn's Superman, at least Rob Pattinson's version." Yeah, I think there's definitely, like, they want that other gritty Batman to continue, because audiences obviously love that. But the fact that they could have a different Batman, which it sounds like they will with Brave and the Bold, so I'm curious to see what it'll be like. But it'll definitely be like a Batman that won't take himself as seriously. He'll be like basically the good dark counter for Superman, and not the evil dark counter, but just like the cynicism that he has to counteract with. Let's see. BK says, yeah, Pattinson's one is separate, but also they've said they're bringing a new one to DCU. Yep, through Brave and the Bold. Scorn says, so far I think Julian McManahan was my favorite interpretation of Doctor Doom. May he rest in peace. Yeah, that was sad to hear about his passing. Let's see how they expect. Yeah, X-Men 97 rocks. First Class is great. Pure Batman camp, a lot of fun. I'm very curious to see what it'll be like. And I think it'll be... I think the fact that they're focusing on other superheroes first, instead of just going directly to Batman versus Superman, I think is a good call. And also that they establish that there are already superheroes running amok in this version of the DCU, which there already was with stuff like Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. So, yeah. Oh, also, I don't know if it's a spoiler for anyone, probably not, but stick around after there are two credit sequences. They're not like the two post-credit sequences are not like huge things, but they're just fun. They're fun ones to stick around for. So, all right. Now we gotta switch gears really hard here and go into a much different film with On Becoming a Guinea Fowl. And I don't know if I have it. I don't know if my voice will hold up. I'll see if I can get through these last two reviews here. But I did want to talk about this film a lot, so I'll take it easy on my voice for this one, though. All right, here we go with the review of On Becoming a Guinea Fowl in 3, 2, 1. So on man, my voice is really going out. Okay, once more with feeling. 3, 2, 1, and go. So on Becoming a Guinea Fowl is a film all about a funeral. And not a, well, not a, like most funerals, yeah, they're not they're not a pleasant experience. But this funeral is extra dark for who it concerns. So this concerns someone called Uncle Fred, whose body is discovered by Shula, played by Susan Shardy, who first discovers her uncle dead in the middle of the road while coming back from what I assume is a costume party because she's dressed up like Missy Elliott. So I guess I should stress, like, this is like a fairly dramatic film, but it does have its moments of absurdity here and there. Like right from the start, because like Shula's dressed up as, Missy Elliott, and, she ventures out of her car and finds her dead Uncle Fred just, lying there on the road. And so thus begins the difficult process of, calling somebody to come out and get the body, contacting the family members, and then just, going through the long and arduous process that's very difficult and very hard of, sending this person off into the next realm while also trying to ignore all the hideous stuff that he did. So yeah, it's Shula is established as this character who doesn't really have she's very muted. Like when she first discovers the dead body, she's a little bit horrified, but she's just kind of, she's got a very like stern face that doesn't have much of a strong reaction. And it's you can understand where that weariness comes from immediately when one of the people she contacts is her dad, and her dad's checked out. Like he can't really pay for anything. He expects Shula to buy everything. He can hardly be present. He doesn't really believe his daughter most of the time. And Shula's just like, okay, yeah, this is typical. This is what dad does. But the real problem for Shula is the fact that she starts learning more about Fred as the funeral nears, and especially very disheartening things about Fred, like how he's essentially raped members of the family and had multiple children that the family doesn't know about. And not to mention, like, Fred also has like a drinking problem and problems at home, especially with his wife, and his wife ends up getting blamed for all of this. So it's a very, like, it's weird to almost say, like, yeah, that there's like absurdist touches here, because it very much is a dark, traumatic story about trying to deal with the consequences of trauma and tragedy when this family that's mostly run by like patriarchs just wants to cover it up as much as possible. Not to mention, like, all the women in the family just kind of want to move on from it because they kind of realize they can't do anything about it, which is why you can understand, like, Shula's weariness to, like, approach this subject and do anything about it. But also, you further understand why Nisana, played by Elizabeth Chisela, is mostly just drunk the whole time. Because she has also experienced, like, the rape that's happened with Uncle Fred, and has chosen to bury it until moments where, like, she's so drunk that she can not only bring it up, but also just, like, laugh about it, because she feels like, like what's the point? Like, now he's dead, he's not going to be held accountable, and because he's dead, everyone in the family is going to think, if we bring this up, we're going to get attacked by this family. They're gonna swarm around us and tell us, oh, it's in poor taste. We're all grieving. You shouldn't bring up that Fred raped a bunch of people and that he was abusive and a drunk and wouldn't be at home most of the time. This isn't the time. It's like Shula and Nisana just kind of stumble their way through this, just like Shula just quietly taking it in while Nisana just drowns herself in drink. And throughout the film, if you're wondering about the title, it's referring to the fact that, Shula tries to relate back to her childhood where she remembers this television program that talked about the guinea fowl and how the sounds that it would make would basically alert people that predators are near. And it's basically, the more it goes along, it becomes obvious to like Shula, like, oh yeah, I can sympathize with a guinea fowl because there are predators right inside our family, and I gotta try to warn everybody about it, especially when a lot of the women would rather just not address it. They would just choose to ignore it, not think about it, cover it up, forget about it just to maintain the order of this family. And the fact that even when they do all that, by the time it gets to like the end of the film, where it looks like all the women in the family, they've all played ball. They've all essentially done what is expected so that they don't piss off the men in their family or like the women who are trying to keep this together. It still crumbles. It still just comes apart with arguments and disagreements and just like bitterness over just, blaming the wrong people and, just being so abusive in this situation that it's just, you can't help but feel like you want to like adopt like Shula's mindset of just, wanting to become more animalistic, if that's basically what has become of this family, where they don't want to address the hideousness that has lurked within it. So it's very much a hard film to watch. It's like it's hard to like even recommend it as like a comedy. It's more like a bittersweet film where it's just like it addresses all this hideous stuff about like, especially with like Shula's dad, played by Henry B.J. Fury. It's just, he's so like, there's one moment where it's just like it feels like it's the perfect scene for like her dad to like wake up and realize like, yes, like Shula has witnessed this abuse and like you should be there for her in this time of need. And even then he's just kind of like, the most he can muster is just like a brief ask of, are you okay? And she was just like, yeah, fine, I'm fine. And it's just like the standard answer. It's just like the most that Shula's dad can do, and it's not enough. And it's just like everything just keeps getting buried. And just like the visions that Shula has through her dreams, which are a little bit surrealist, which I guess could relate a little bit more to the absurdist angle, just start, she just starts like manifesting all these memories and these types of visions about like, her past and how she's basically trying to deal with everything that's going on in the present. So it's a very, especially like Susan Shardy's performance here is so nuanced for just how little she says, and it's mostly just her expressions and just her dry reactions to her highly emotional family who is all caught up in the funeral process and would, and just like look down on her. And Shula's just like, yeah, I know what you guys are doing. I've seen what's been going on here. I don't like what you're doing, but I know you won't listen, so whatever. I'm here. We'll go ahead with the funeral, but, I don't approve of any of this. And especially, like, and I don't want to make it seem like it's just like all the women are just distance themselves from Shula. There are moments where they have a genuine connection, where they try to stress, like, Shula, we do feel all the pain here, but we can't do anything about it. Do you understand our predicament here? And it's a very tearful moment where they just kind of break into song just to kind of like, basically do what the only thing they can do, which is just cover it up and try to, look towards something better going in their lives, as opposed to just this very rigid family tradition that is just eroding, a lot of the women from within. Like there's great despair, like especially within like, Fred's wife, who just feels like it becomes more nihilistic as the film goes along. It's like watching her slip into the same funk that Shula and Nasana have slipped into as well, and it's a different type of behavior that she adopts, but it's still an understandable one where you realize these women just become more and more disenchanted by the family structure that they've been, told for so long they need to maintain and preserve. So yeah, it's a very awkward, very tough watch, with little moments of humor here and there. But yeah, it's mostly a very poignant drama about family connections during the worst of times, in terms of both like the funeral and the trauma of like family abuse. So yeah, not an easy film to watch, but definitely a fantastic film to watch. This is definitely, I think, one of my favorite films of this year, just for the juggling of tones and different subject matter while being willing to go into weird areas with this material. So yeah, it's a very fascinating film. So, on Becoming a Guinea Fowl, you'll be happy to know is currently playing on Max right now. So, that film is up there. It's definitely one of my favorites of this year. So if you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. We'll read a little bit more of the chat here before I get to the last film. What do you think of Superman? I love Superman. You can go back in the stream if you want to see my reaction, but I love the film. But I mean, I've always loved Superman. I've loved reading like All-Star Superman and Superman Smashes the Klan and what was that? What's So Wrong About Truth, Justice, and the American Way? I think was that run. Grant Morrison's run. I know a lot of people are conflicted about like Grant Morrison sometimes. I liked his run from the New 52. I thought it was pretty fine. I'm mostly talking about comics at this point. I mean, I love the movie, but I just, I want to, the ways that I keep up with Superman most is through the comics and stuff like that. So, like, the Jonathan Kent arc of Superman, I'm a little bit frustrated with because I like the ideas that it sets up, but I feel like when it gets to the end of those arcs, I don't feel like it pays off as well. I like Jonathan Kent as a character. I think that they arrive too quickly at like resolves for the stuff that he brings up. Like he brings up how like, yeah, Superman should be doing more in the world. Like I should be more engaged in climate change and the immigrant process. But then there would always be like something to like throw it off or divert from it a little bit, like an alternative timeline or something like that, and they get a little bit derailed and it would kind of just end up on like this almost kind of like emotional platitude for where that character can go with it. So I've got mixed feelings on the Jonathan Kent comics, but yeah, outside of that, My Adventures with Superman is a fantastic show. If you have not been watching it, you are missing out on one of the most adorable Superman shows ever made. Oh my god, the way that Jack Quaid playing Clark Kent, so wonderful. Just an adorable show. Looking forward to season 3, which I think is coming out later this year. I think it has to be. I mean, the seasons have been coming out pretty progressively, and we haven't gotten the new season yet. Let's see. Linear Organized and Goal Directed says they made how many Batman movies and 0 Martian Manhunter movies? I think it'd be great if done right. I think so too. I think, if it looks like what James Gunn is doing up here, because, like I said, I think the film is kind of leaning more into Justice League International, which Martian Manhunter was a part of, so maybe we'll get a JLI film sooner or later, and then we'll get some Martian Manhunter in there. I feel you can do them well, but I think you really have to have someone good he can play off of. It's like, because I think someone mentioned this too, like they really love Mr. Terrific in the Superman film, and they were like, oh, he should get his own film. It's like, yeah, he should, but he needs someone to play off of, because he's got like that fun, like dry and wry wit to him, but you need someone to play off. You need someone like Superman to play off him to make that work, don't worry about the review. You can check back in the stream. I haven't locked it or anything, and I'll try to post a video review of it, the video segment tomorrow up there. You can also read my review at movieswithmark.com. All right. God, I get some more water here. Thankfully, we only got one more film left to review, and it's a weird one. And yes, this is a real film, in case you're wondering. Alright. This is kind of going to be more of a short review, just because I don't have too much to say about it. But also I can feel my voice going, so let's see if we can do this well. Man, I hope my voice... I gotta get, like, some honey and, like, lozenges for next year's anime detour. Otherwise, like, my doing like 8 panels in a row is gonna like ruin my voice. One year it really ruined my voice. I couldn't talk for a whole day after that. Okay, So let's go right now before I lose it. Here we go with Batman Ninja versus Yakuza League in 3, 2, 1. So Batman Ninja versus Yakuza League is a film that exists, and it continues on from the previous animated film on home video of Batman Ninja, which basically wanted to more or less place Batman in the style of an anime and reimagine all of his rogues gallery as anime characters. And Batman Ninja did that, but they did that with a kind of more of like a dated, classic like feudal era Japan type deal. But with Yakuza League, it places Batman in a scenario that's much more wild, because now it's more like modern day Japan. So now we've got the Yakuza, basically. So now, like, all the Justice League and the supervillains are now basically all Yakuza. So you get some cool stuff, like Superman now looking like this giant Yakuza type figure. You have Wonder Woman as like a little bit more of like a samurai type. You have Ra's al Ghul as another Yakuza lord who has like really weird methods of like trapping people, and like there's, I'm not kidding when I say this film just like laces all the weird stuff with anime and just forces it into this film no matter how absurd it is. Because like one of the first things that starts off the film, where Batman is trying to figure out why there's like a giant floating version of Japan in the sky. While he's trying to figure this out, there's, and I kid you not, this is the language they use, there's a hurricane of Yakuza, where it's quite literal. Like it's a rainstorm that comes through, and all these like suited up Yakuza in jetpack just rain down from the sky. And Batman and Robin and Nightwing and the Red Hood, they all have to fight him. So it's very much a ridiculous show. And, at first, I wasn't really getting into it as much, just mostly because, like, they very much are keen on making this like an anime. Like, it's from two anime directors, Junpei Mizusaki and Shinji Takakage. It's also written by Kazuki Nakashima, who also wrote the Batman Ninja anime, but also some, and this I found actually very fitting, he also wrote on stuff like Gurren Lagann and Kill la Kill, which, if you're familiar with those anime, they're very frenetic, over-the-top, fast-paced, absurd, ridiculous type of anime. And once I looked up, like, their names while I was watching this, I was like, okay, you know what? This is making more sense as it goes along, because it's getting more ridiculous, just throwing more wild characters out there, throwing in more ridiculous shit that doesn't make sense, which actually kind of made me appreciate the film a little bit more past the at least for like the first act of this film. I found the English dub they have in this film just atrocious. Like, you have like, I mean, like they just like grab like a few names who are not that notable. Like Joe Daniels is playing Batman, and he's really not doing that good of a job, but I get the feeling almost like that the dub was kind of like an afterthought, because they looked at this film and they were just like, okay, this is ridiculous. There's a hurricane of Yakuza. There's, Superman as like an intimidating Yakuza figure. There's Harley Quinn in a schoolgirl outfit. This is, you have like Joker with the pompadour. It's all ridiculous crap. So should we put that much effort into it? And I get the feeling like for the first act, they were trying and failing to be very tongue-in-cheek. But then I think once a lot more of like the ridiculous animation takes over after the first act, I think it kind of won me over a little bit, because it became apparent like they were just trying to find silly stuff to do in every scene, and very much in like a tongue-in-cheek nature. And it's surprising, I think, how much of that comes through as being like kind of clever. Not all that hilarious or funny, but fairly clever with like what they want to infuse this script with. Like at one point, like Ra's al Ghul is talking to, I think, like Robin, saying like, hey, would you like some sushi? And it's like, yeah, I'll have California rolls. It's like, oh, you eat that crap? It's like okay, that's not bad. And just some of the designs are ridiculous, and Not to mention, like, the way that Batman could just figure out all this interdimensional stuff so easily. I think they kind of play that up as a little bit ridiculous. Let's kind of get some, like, Brave and the Bold vibes here. Also, the animation kind of won me over after a while. Like, it's stylized in this kind of like 3D, like 3D cell shading, but with like with what's the right terminology? But with like more of like a like scribbled texture to the characters and how like they frame the edges and stuff like that. So it does kind of look more like kind of like the rough drawings that you would see in something like Kill la Kill or Gurren Lagann. Not as exaggerated to that degree, but like little touches of it here and there, which I thought worked fairly well for this type of film. It didn't quite get me as invested in seeing where this would all go, because like you more or less, by the time you get to the third act, you see where all this is going and how it's going to establish the characters and where they're going to go in their certain fights, that it kind of goes on autopilot by that point. And to a degree, I can't blame them, because like it's just a film trying to be absurd with placing Batman in an anime setting with modern anime tropes and just being silly with it, which, you know, I would much rather a film like this be silly with it instead of just being more stern and earnest with trying to make like an actual like serious anime Batman. It's like, no, I already got that stuff with Gotham Knights, which is like a hodgepodge of different anime Batman short films we got many years ago. I've already got that. I would like to see, the ridiculous side of Batman, and we get enough of that in this film where it's like, okay, you know what, this isn't bad. Like, I'm not fully digging it, but for what they're trying here, it's surprising how much of it is kind of working here. So yeah, if you like and I gotta stress this, you gotta be willing to go into this and just recognize how silly it is, how ridiculous it is that, you know, they've changed all these characters to fit this modern anime setting and just, you know, wink and nod along with all the absurd. It's a very absurd DC Comics animated film, and if you go into the film with that mindset, it's not bad. It's a fairly entertaining animated film, which is saying a lot for these direct-to-video animated DC Comics projects, which more often than not they miss the mark. And this one actually was pretty well on target here. I kind of dug this one. So Batman Ninja versus Yakuza League is currently playing on Max, if you want to see it. First Batman Ninja was rough to watch. Yeah, I didn't like that one either. But this one was actually trying to be silly, and I kind of liked it. If you go into it with low expectations, I think you'll like it. For sure. That's wild that came out so close to Superman. I mean, like, I know, like, the show to watch immediately after Superman is going to be when Peacemaker comes out next month. Especially since, I don't know if anyone's seen the trailer, but Peacemaker has established that, yeah, Green Lantern and Hawkgirl are going to be in the new show, so... Or the new season, rather. Let's see... I just picked up. Quintley Wilkins says I just picked up Sorcerer today. The 4K. Okay, the actual film. Yeah. Wow. Where did you order that, or did you find it? Because like I was trying to look for it during the was it the Barnes and Noble sale? I was trying to look for it there, because like someone else like. I think that's what everyone is looking for, and I think it got gobbled up immediately. Because I went to like 2 different locations, and both times I went there was someone else browsing the section for the sale, and they were like, "Have you seen Sorcerer?" It's like, "No, I haven't seen it." It's like, "Damn it!" And I went to the other Barnes and Noble, and they were like, "Sorcerer's in here." It's like, "No, damn it!" You did find it at Barnes and Noble. Oh, you lucky son of a bitch! I didn't find it, unfortunately. I did find I guess actually. One moment here. Speaking of the Criterion sale, I actually did get some pretty good ones. Give me a moment here. So let's see. I grabbed this one and this one, and did the other one go? I thought I had it here, didn't I? Didn't. I thought... Well, I don't know where the other one went. Unless I'm hiding it somewhere. Didn't I have it? Wait, I thought it was like, 5... There it is. Alright. Okay. I'm sure there was riveting footage there. But yeah, so yeah, here was my Criterion haul. I've been meaning to get around to this film. Everyone has told me so much about it. Bigger Than Life, which is about a dad who takes some drug and gets progressively worse, and it's supposed to be like an indictment of the domestic family. So I have never seen this before, but I've heard that it's been described as one of like the best films about tackling the suburban family, and so I was immediately intrigued by that. So I'm looking forward to that. One film I have seen, but I've been meaning to get Blu-ray for a long time, is the Long Good Friday with Bob Hoskins. I'm sure for a lot of people who've only seen it as American, you probably know Bob Hoskins from stuff like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and the Super Mario Brothers movie and Hook. I'm telling you, this is his best work. Like, I did love him in Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa's a pretty good one. But this is Hoskins at his best. Just like this pissed off like gangster, just like trying to assert himself in the UK among all these like American gangsters who are honing in on him. And just like, oh my God, the last shot of this film where it's just like he's in the back of the car and he kind of like realizes like, he's done. Like he's screwed up. Like this is it. His life is over. He has like this expression of just like grit and anger, but almost kind of like this like smirking acceptance of it. It's just like, oh, that just like to the bitter end. Like he is just like digging his teeth into this role. So yeah, this is the best Bob Hoskins role, and I'm finally glad that I have it on Blu-ray here. I actually haven't seen, like, there's a nice documentary here about the making of like films in like the late 1970s, I think, in the UK. So I'm very intrigued to watch that. Yeah. And then I got me some Paul Schrader. I got Mishima in the nice Blu-ray set. Oh God, I love just like looking at that, the little details in there, and just looking at like the photographs and stuff like that. It's been a while since I've seen this film, but I've never actually watched the apparently there's a different version with narration by Roy Scheider, which I have not seen that one. So I'm very curious to see that the different version. I'm always curious about like different versions, stuff like that. Because I've heard there's like a different like soundtrack for like certain films, stuff like that, like Metropolis. So I always love listening to different tracks like that, and that's one of the reasons why it's great to buy these Blu-rays. So yeah, those are my 3 hauls for the month: is Mishima, Long Good Friday, and Bigger Than Life. So one of them I have not seen. Looking forward to that. Bigger Than Life sounds like live footage of a bear. Wonder if it was inspired that. It might be. I've heard it cited as one of the most inspirational films of the it's the 50s, I think. Yeah, 1956. Yeah. An Eisenhower throat gabber. Shot in Cinescope. Oh, so it's gonna look nice on Blu-ray. So yeah, those are my Criterion choices. Let's see. All right, so let's do a quick recap of the films we reviewed on today's stream. So, of course, the big one that we reviewed was Superman. I'm a huge Superman fan, and James Gunn did exactly what I expected him to do with the Superman. He brings out a lot of the fun stuff from the comics, but also puts a lot of his own personal hallmarks in there. Makes it a story about not just like the immigrant experience, but also how Superman functions politically, nature versus nurture, exploring brain versus brawn, all the great stuff that makes Superman such an endearing character is in this film. It is my favorite Superman film since the original Richard Donner film. It's just about up there in the same, perhaps on par. I'd have to watch it a few more times, but yeah, this is one of my favorite Superman films for sure. I reviewed On Becoming a Guinea Fowl, which is about a funeral for an uncle who has raped several people in the family and dealing with that trauma in a way of just like manifesting all that trauma into something deeply, uncomfortable, but also a little bit absurd at times. So very bittersweet film, awkward. Once you see this film, I think you'll understand why it's so wonderfully absorbing, because it never feels like it's trying to be one thing in the moment there. It explores so much. It's definitely one of my favorites of this year. You got to check it out. And finally reviewed Batman Ninja versus Yakuza League. Very ridiculous attempt to make an anime Batman, but it was bonkers enough where I kind of dug it. I'm not in love with it, but for being just ridiculous shit, it is what it is, and I think it did an okay job with it. So among all those films, I think you can't go wrong with Superman or On Becoming a Guinea Fowl. But if you're going out to the theater, obviously go out and see Superman if you can. I mean, it's going to be a big weekend. I've heard it's tracking pretty large, so try to find a good time if you can. But if you can't, you're staying at home, watch On Becoming a Guinea Fowl. It doesn't have superheroes. Like, if you really do want them, you can watch Batman Ninja versus Yakuza League. It's not as good though. But if you want an actual good film, On Becoming a Guinea Fowl, it is what you gotta check out. And those are that's on Max as well. All right, so if you want to read any of my reviews, you can check out movieswithmark.com, in which I do already have up the written review of Superman, spoiler free, of course. And if you'd like more early reviews of Superman and other films coming up in the future, be sure to like this video so more people know about Superman and why they should go see it this weekend. But also be sure to subscribe so you can keep up to date with the latest films. I'll also check out my Patreon in the description, where I write movie history books, so you can get yourself a copy of that there as well. So you don't just get access to videos early. There's also like physical, tactile stuff that you can get with the Patreon. So actually selling stuff there. And I will be back in about 2 weeks, where we are going to talk about the next superhero film coming out in July with Fantastic Four, and I think there's a few other films coming out. I think we've got a new I Know What You Did Last Summer coming out this summer as well. So another horror retread. We'll see if it's any good. I mean, I don't know. Could surprise me. Final Destination surprised me this year, so I'm hoping that I can get the same from this horror saga that's gotten dug up from the dead. So I'll read from the chat here really quickly there. Those A24 Blu-rays and 4K hard copies are money. Those designs are pimp as hell. Yeah, the packaging is a big thing for it too. I mean, the other thing, like, I was just having this conversation today too, because people are saying one of the Prime deals today is the complete Twin Peaks for about like $60, I think, which is a really good deal for like all 3 seasons and the movie Fire Walk with Me and like the separate movie of the 90 minutes of deleted scenes. All that in there, it's a good deal, but it's in like this very flimsy plastic case, which I hate when they put them in there. And I don't feel as bad now that I spent all that money on the because I have like the complete mystery right here, which is I love the packaging of that, because you open it up and you flip through it, and if you get to the very end of all the discs, they have the little Fire Walk with Me paper at the bottom of it, because it does have the Fire Walk with Me movie in there. And I also have the Return. I think I have it on one of the other shelves, but I do have Twin Peaks: The Return, and that has pretty cool packaging as well. So yeah, the packaging is what's worth it too. Because then instead of showing everyone your watch list, you can be like, oh, look, check out Mishima. Check out the cool packaging here. Check out the nice little opening there. The wonderful little booklet with all the high quality glossy photographs. Like, just look at that set design. Look at that crap. Look at, just, jeez, like, look at that. My goodness. That's why you get this stuff. That's why it's fun to pull this stuff off the shelf and look at the cool packaging and read the essays they got in there. So, yeah. As if I need to make more of a case for physical media. I mean, you know. But yeah, and not to mention, good quality to watch that, so you don't have to worry about streaming quality. So yeah, I will be back in 2 weeks to talk about the new Fantastic Four movie, Fantastic Four First Steps. So be sure to tune in next time for that. I will have the video review of Superman up by tomorrow, and I'm currently working on more video essays. I know a lot of you have come to this channel because you discovered those. Don't worry, I am working on more. They're getting bigger, much bigger. And I also want to make sure I have control over them, so I'm not just doing like stuff that the algorithm demands. I want to actually like make more personally infused essays that aren't just like constantly talking about grifters. Like I want to actually put more of like what I did with like I have no mouth and I must scream into Critical Drinkers stuff. So you'll get more of that coming in the future. So yeah, until next time, see you next time, everybody. Have fun at Superman.